All right, welcome back everyone for another deep dive. You know how we do it around here. We pick a fascinating topic and really get into it.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. So today, we're talking about a pretty incredible bird, the Spanish Imperial Eagle. This is a species that was, get this, super close to disappearing forever.
Yeah, it's a real nail-biter of a story.
But they made a comeback. And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. We're going to look at how conservation efforts can actually work, how delicate these ecosystems are, and just how resilient nature can be, you know?
Absolutely. It's a testament to what's possible when people work together.
Exactly. And to guide us on this journey, we're using an excerpt from this article, The Spanish Imperial Eagle, Aquila adalberti, a symbol of conservation success. Catchy title, right?
It's right to the point.
Okay, so first things first, we got to talk about this eagle's appearance.
Oh, please?
Seriously, they're majestic. I read somewhere they have like a wingspan as wide as a car.
Oh, yeah. No, that's not an exaggeration. I mean, these guys are huge EE. They can be 75 to 85 centimeters long, and then the wingspan, forget about it, up to 220 centimeters.
Whoa, hold on. 220.
Yep. That's like over 7 feet. Imagine seeing that soaring overhead.
I can't even picture it. So they must stand out, right? What do they look like?
Well, the adults have this dark brown plumage, almost black, but then they've got these brilliant white patches on their shoulders.
Oh, wow. So there's like a contrast.
Big time. And then you add a pale golden crown on their head and yellow legs, and you've got a bird that looks like royalty. Seriously, it's impressive.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And the younger birds, are they all decked out like that too?
Not quite. The juveniles are actually pretty different. They start out with a more tawny, lighter brown color, and it takes them a few years to get those really dark feathers and the striking white markings.
Oh, interesting. So it's like they mature into their
Yeah.
fancy outfit.
Exactly. And all these distinct markings aren't just for looks. They're super important for the eagles to recognize each other,
Right.
especially during, like mating season or when they're defending their territory.
Oh, that makes sense. Like a visual language almost.
Right. It's like, hey, I'm a Spanish Imperial Eagle and this is my spot.
Ugh.
All communicated through their feathers.
Nature is so cool. But these guys are more than just a pretty face. They're predators, right? At the top of the food chain.
Oh, absolutely. They are apex predators in their ecosystem. And what's really interesting, their main source of food, rabbits.
Really? Just bunnies.
Well, mostly rabbits. They make up the majority of their diet. But these eagles are also pretty adaptable. They'll hunt other small mammals if they need to, birds sometimes, and they're not above scavenging either. If they find a carcass, they'll take advantage of it.
So they're opportunistic. Makes sense. Gotta survive.
Exactly. Survival of the fittest.
Now, these eagles live in this really specific habitat, right? The dehiscence.
Yeah, you got it.
And what's that like? Can you, paint us a picture of what it looks like there?
Okay, so picture this. You're in Spain, mostly in the central and southwestern parts, or maybe a little bit in Portugal, and you're surrounded by these rolling hills, okay?
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And scattered across these hills are these gorgeous oak trees, not too dense, just kind of spread out. And in between the trees, open pastures. It's almost like picture a parkland, but it's wild and natural.
Okay, that sounds beautiful.
Oh, it is. And it's super important for the eagles. The open areas give them the perfect hunting grounds, plenty of space to spot those rabbits, and then the trees. Perfect for nesting.
So there's this perfect balance for them.
Exactly. It's called a dehesa, and it's a really unique landscape, kind of like a Spanish version of the African savanna or the South American pampas.
Wow, that's a great comparison. It really sets the scene.
Yeah.
But this story takes kind of a dark turn back in the 1970s. Things got really bad for these eagles.
Yeah, things got pretty dire. In the 70s, the Spanish Imperial Eagle was on the verge of disappearing completely. They were down to only about 50 breeding pairs left in the whole world.
Seriously.
Yeah.
That's hardly any.
I know, right? It was scary. And that's why the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, they had to classify them as critically endangered. That basically means they were at a super high risk of going extinct in the wild. One bad year, and that could have been it.
Wow. So what happened? Why did their numbers get so low?
Well, a lot of things were happening at the same time. One of the biggest culprits was habitat loss, like we talked about. They need those dehesas, right? But people were clearing forest for farmland and for development, and that was destroying their nesting sites and hunting grounds. It was like taking away their home and their grocery store all at once.
I see. So it was like a domino effect.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you had another huge problem, poisoning. Farmers were using poison to control the rabbit populations, which, ironically, was hurting the eagles even more.
Oh, wow. So it was like a double whammy.
Right. And it just goes to show how interconnected everything in an ecosystem is. You try to solve one problem, but it creates another one somewhere else.
Makes you think.
Yeah.
But then the story takes this crazy turn. The Eagles actually start making a comeback. Tell me everything.
I know. It's seriously impressive. So thankfully, people realized just how bad the situation was, and they started taking action. Like, a whole bunch of conservation efforts got put into place.
So, like, what kind of things?
Well, one of the biggest things was habitat protection. They started designating huge areas of these dehizas as protected areas, which meant no more development, no more clearing land. It was like giving the eagles a safe space to just be eagles, to nest and hunt without being disturbed.
Makes sense. Protect their home, give them the chance to rebuild, but what else? I mean, they must have done more than just protect the land, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. They also brought in legal measures to protect the eagles from hunting and poisoning. Like, it became illegal to kill them or to use certain types of poisons that were harming them.
So they made it against the law to mess with them.
Exactly. And then another really important thing was public awareness campaigns. They started educating people about the eagles, why they were important, and how to help protect them.
So getting people on board with the whole thing.
Yep. That was huge GE. Because when people care, they're more likely to support the conservation efforts, donate money, volunteer. It creates this whole movement.
And it sounds like it worked.
It definitely did. But on top of all that, they also did some very targeted things to address the specific threats. Like, remember how we talked about rabbits being such a big part of their diet?
Yeah, their favorite food.
Well, they started working to restore rabbit populations. Because without enough rabbits, the eagles can't survive.
Okay, so they were like, more bunnies for the Eagles.
Right. And then another really cool thing they did was to deal with the power line problem. You see, eagles have these huge wingspans, and they were getting electrocuted by power lines.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a big problem. So they started requiring power line companies to put these special protective devices on their poles to prevent the eagles from getting hurt.
Okay, so it was like a combination of big picture stuff, like protecting the habitat and raising awareness, and then also these very practical solutions to specific problems.
Yeah, exactly. It was a multi-pronged approach, you could say.
Now, I'm also curious about captive breeding programs. Did they do any of that?
Yes, they did. And that was another crucial piece of the recovery puzzle. So captive breeding programs involve basically raising eagles in captivity in a controlled environment where they're safe and can reproduce. And then once they're old enough, they release them back into the wild to boost those existing populations.
So like giving the wild population a little bit of a helping hand.
Exactly. And it's not always easy, but it can be super effective. Plus, it helps to introduce genetic diversity into the population, which makes them stronger and more resilient in the long run.
Makes sense. Okay, so after all that effort, all those different approaches, what's the situation like today? How are the eagles doing?
Well, as of today, there are over 500 breeding pairs soaring the skies of Spain.
Wow, that's a huge increase.
I know. It's amazing, right? It's still not perfect, though. They're still classified as vulnerable, which means they're not completely out of danger. But compared to where they were in the 70s, it's a monumental achievement.
Yeah, they were so close to disappearing.
Right, but they came back. And that's why the Spanish Imperial Eagle is a symbol of hope. It shows that even when things seem really bad, we can turn things around if we put in the effort and work together.
It's inspiring. It really is.
Yeah.
But, like you said, vulnerable means there's still challenges, right? What are some of the things they're still facing?
Yeah, for sure. Conservation is never really done, It's an ongoing process. So for the Spanish Imperial Eagle, some of the ongoing threats are things like deforestation, urban expansion, and agriculture getting more and more intense. Basically, humans are still encroaching on their habitat.
So it's like we've got to find a way to share the space, right?
Exactly. And then there are still issues with things like rabbit diseases, accidental poisoning, electrocution from those power lines, and sometimes even illegal hunting.
So there's always something to be aware of, always more work to be done.
Absolutely. But the good news is we know it works. We've seen that with the Spanish Imperial Eagle. We just got to keep at it.
Well said.
Hmm.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of the Spanish Imperial Eagle.
What a story, right? From the brink of extinction to soaring high again. It really highlights the power of conservation and reminds us that even in the face of huge challenges, there's always hope.
Absolutely.
So if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. And let us know in the comments what other amazing species you want us to explore next. Until then, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those conservation efforts going.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, that's a wrap for today.